This same type of distortion was at work in some recent Wall Street analysis of statistics released by the New York Fed on household borrowing. The New York Fed reported that household borrowing had hit a new peak of $1 trillion in the second quarter of 2018, far surpassing its peak of $1 trillion in the frothy years preceding the financial crisis. Some analysts argued that this was actually good news because, while household borrowing was up, so was consumers' disposable, after-tax, income, which hit $1 trillion in the second quarter. This put the debt-to-income ratio, DTI, at 86%, significantly lower than its all-time high of 116% in 2008 at the peak of the housing bubble. Thus, American households were financially healthy and had plenty of room to borrow even more, or so the argument went. It is true that household debt in nominal dollars doesn't tell you whether American households are overextended without comparing that debt to the income available to repay it. However, to use the go-go years leading up to the crisis as the benchmark for sustainable rates of household borrowing is questionable, to say the least. In fact, household DTIs were substantially lower than today's levels throughout the post-war years. It wasn't until the early 2000s that they started to escalate with the subprime lending craze. So by historical norms, even at 86%, household DTIs are quite high. The New York Fed does provide some data on household debt growth rates by income level. This data show that non-mortgage household borrowing, primarily credit cards, auto and student loans, has grown significantly over the past 5 years among lower-income families, while mortgage loans have declined. Mortgage lending standards have tightened since the crisis, but now those families may be getting in over their heads with non-mortgage borrowing. Indeed, non-mortgage debt has grown by a whopping 38% over the past 5 years, and its ratio to disposable income is even higher than during the pre-crisis years. Another statistic Wall Street analysts have cited to argue that American households are not overborrowing is the sharp increase in household net worth relative to income, a common measure of balance sheet health. However, here again, to get an accurate picture, you must get behind aggregate numbers and look at the distribution of wealth by income level. Things are not as bad as they were during the subprime crisis yet. But if we are to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past, we need to stop deluding ourselves with Twain's damnable statistics. We need a clear-eyed understanding of the fragile financial condition of our most vulnerable households with better data and policies that would increase their disposable income. Regressive payroll taxes, high health care premiums, escalating education costs, poorly designed means testing of programs all weigh on the purchasing power of working families and cry out for forceful policy responses. China thinks long-term on financial stability, so should we. Former FDIC chair, why we shouldn't ban Bitcoin. Sheila Bair, Trump is going after the Bill of Rights. Former FDIC chair, the Fed needs to get serious about its own digital currency.